And we are recording. So we're here to let your voice be heard, and I'm going to let you say your name and tell your story.
Okay, my name is Carinda Worley, and I am from close to Dallas, Texas, from Waxahachie, Texas. I have RSD or CRPS, which is reflexive sympathetic dystrophy, or as it's also known as complex regional pain syndrome. This is, my 16th year of having it.
Wow.
However, just recently it has spread and gotten probably 85% worse.
Wow.
In this last year. It started out as a simple injury to my foot. I was a music teacher, and one of my students' desks, the legs gave out, and the desk toppled over right on top of my foot, right across the bridge where all the bones are at. I didn't originally feel the pain. I heard the loud crashing, and then I looked down and I saw that the desk was on top of my foot, and I went, oh, and I pulled my foot out from underneath the desk, and the shoes that I was wearing, they had a buckle that went right across the top of that bridge, and they had these little cutouts, circular cutouts right there, and I immediately saw my skin just blowing up outside of the shoe, and it was swelling so much, and then I felt the pain.
Wow.
I couldn't put pressure on my foot, and I limped over to the wall, and I just leaned across the wall, and I started to cry. And one of the students ran out and grabbed the principal when she came in, and unfortunately my son was in the classroom at the time, and of course he was very worried and concerned, and Mom, are you okay? And I was like, I'm okay. And, they had me sit down, and they took me to the emergency room, and I had an x-ray done, and they said, there's no bones broken. You'll be bruised, and you'll be sore, stay in this hard-soled shoe for a couple of weeks and stay off of it, take you, this medicine, and you should be fine. So I used the crutches and wore the shoe, iced it, did everything that they said to do. In about 2 weeks, I still could not put pressure on my foot. It hurt extremely bad. It didn't feel normal. So I called back to the doctor, and they said that you need to go see an orthopedic. I went to see the orthopedic, and he diagnosed me with having Morton's neuromas in my foot. He gave me 2 injections that went in between your toes. It was the strangest feeling to feel like something inside your foot is about to blow up. But that's exactly the sensation I felt when they, started injecting it with all that cortisone and stuff. It immediately hurt afterwards and that night. But the next day, I felt like I could walk pretty good. I didn't have as much pain. It was okay. I happened to be going on a trip to see my mom back home in Wyoming, and so I flew by myself back home to see my mom, and it was sore and it was tender, but I was able to walk on it. But by the time I got back home to Dallas, I couldn't walk on my foot again. It hurt so bad, and the pain was worse, and it kept growing. So I went back to the doctor, told him, and he said, you need to have surgery to remove these neuromas. So went through, and this was right as 9/11 happened. My surgery was September 13th. So, I'm thinking after everything happened on 9/11 that they were going to cancel my surgery. I didn't know what was going on. I was kind of frantic, and I kept thinking, well, maybe that's the Lord. Maybe that's, I'm not supposed to have surgery. I'm not, I need to just wait. And then they called and said that they were going to go ahead and do the surgery. So I had the surgery done, and this doctor's words when he came out of surgery and talked to my husband and myself, he said, I literally tore the blank out of your foot. And I just looked at him, and he said, I could not find those nerves. I had to shred your tissue all the way down to the bottom of your foot. He said, there they was sitting right there. He said, they were big SOBs. You know, he was using foul language, and I'm just out of surgery and just done. And I never got better. I got worse. The surgery didn't help. I was in so much pain after the surgery. I know that him tearing the tissue up the way he did exacerbated everything that was already going on in there. And I went back to him, and he said, well, there's nothing else I can do for you. He's like, you'll have to find another doctor. I've done everything I can. So I was on the quest. Of course, with workers' comp, you don't always get to choose your doctors. And so I found a good, wonderful Christian man who helped me quite a bit in finding doctors, Dr. Osborne, and he led me to some doctors, and that's when I was diagnosed with having the RSD. At first they called it I can never pronounce it, Casalgia, and I wasn't familiar with all those terms, and wasn't quite sure what they were all talking about. But I had a wonderful doctor who, kind of explained what it was, and that I needed to be very careful in the treatment that I got and the things that I did so that I would not have this to get worse. And he was very quick at getting workers' comp to get me into the right doctors and get the appropriate treatment. So I got into a good doctor, and we went through and had the back injections done. Those helped for only a few days at a time, and then they sent me in right away to get the spinal cord stimulator. Went through the trial and got my first spinal cord stimulator, and I loved it. It felt strange, but it took my pain away. I was able to wear shoes. I was able to walk. I was able to do a lot of things. The only issue I had was it was very tight in my back, and so I wasn't able to twist or bend and things like that, but I could handle it. I was doing good. I had that stimulator in for a little over a year, and all my pain went away. I was able to turn off my stimulator and had it off for a whole year. Went to the doctor and told him, and I said, the only pain I have is pain in my back from the stimulator. And he said, well, let's get it removed.
Praise
and
God.
I said, okay, great. Had no idea that RSD could come back. I had no idea that it went into remission. I thought I was cured. I thought that the Lord had healed me, this disease or whatever it was gone away, and I was going to be fine. So I went in and had the stimulator removed. A year to the day, I started getting pain back in my toes. And I immediately recognized what that pain was. And fear, that was the first feeling I felt, was fear. It overtook me, and I immediately went back to my doctor. He got me immediately back in. But with workers' comp, things are a little bit slower, so you don't get in fast. You don't always get the treatment immediately that you really need, and especially with this disease, as we're all learning more and more about it, that the sooner you get treatment, the better off you are.
Absolutely.
I wasn't able to get in fast enough. The disease started spreading. It went up into my ankle joint. I had a lot of inflammation and a lot of discoloration that started to appear on my foot. So I went in, and immediately workers' comp said, you have to have the stimulator put back in. We will not pay for any other treatment other than this. So I had my second spinal cord stimulator put back in. However, I was not able to get good placement of the lead. And at the time I didn't do my studying, and I didn't really research the spinal cord stimulators, I guess. But, this was back in early 2000s that, I got this. And so there wasn't still a whole lot of studies done or a lot of information that was out there. And I had percutaneous leads that were in, and they move around a lot. They aren't, in there. They're kind of free floating within your spinal canal.
Okay.
And because I had already had a previous one, I had some scar tissue that built up in there. So they weren't able to get these leads in where I needed them to. So I had 6 different revisions done with that 1-second spinal cord stimulator. Now, when I say revisions, that every time they went in, I had 6 weeks in between for healing time to see if they were in the right place. So I had to have the surgery, heal for 6 weeks, go back, have the doctor, turn it on, have him, feel it. Still wasn't getting enough coverage. It wasn't where it was supposed to be. He had to go in and do more revisions, which meant getting pre-approved, getting the surgery, 6 more weeks. And every time they fully would cut open your back and do, remove all of the tissue around your spine. So every time they were doing this, I was having more and more scar tissue that was building up in there. Finally, I spent enough. I think we're as good as we're going to get. I'm done. I can't do any more surgeries. Doctor agreed that it was as good as it was going to get. And I dealt with it. I was good. I was okay. It was manageable. I could wear flip-flops. I couldn't wear closed shoes. I couldn't wear socks. I could not wear pantyhose at all. I couldn't have a blanket sit on my foot still. Those things created more pain that I wasn't able to get covered by my stimulator. But my everyday normal pain of walking I was able to keep that pain under control with my stimulator. So I was okay with that. And I just rearranged my life and the things that I did so that I didn't have so much pain. But my children and my husband will tell you that I would do so much, because we still have a life to live. We still have chores to do, things, I wasn't able to work outside of the home. The Lord, has blessed us with my husband being able to own his own plumbing company and, pastor of our church. So I didn't have to go to work. And I'm very fortunate in that. But yet, I still had things around the house to do. I was homeschooling my 2 children, and I found that if I stayed busy and doing things, I could keep the focus off of my pain. And then when time came, I would just take enough Benadryl and pain medication to knock myself out so I could get at least 4 hours of sleep before the pain started again. And that was my routine for, several years, more than 10, 15 years. That was what I did. And then last March, I got up, and it was a normal day, was going out. We had quite a bit of winter precipitation here in Texas, and that had all started melting, and the ground was just very wet, and it was kind of a rainy day, and I stepped outside to feed my dog, and I stepped out on the grass. I was in my Sunday dress, wearing my, simple little shoes, and my good leg slipped out from underneath me.
I'm
and
so sorry.
All my weight landed on my left leg, which is my bad leg, and I immediately heard, and in my head, I thought, oh, that's not going to be good. I didn't feel any pain. I just heard that, and you catch yourself, and my arms were flailing, and I could caught myself, and as I went to put more pressure down on that leg, it wasn't there.
I'm so sorry.
I started falling, and I saw my legs sticking out to the side, and I still felt no pain, but I immediately fell to the ground right on that leg that was sticking out to the side, and it flipped it all the way up. Wow. And I was looking at the bottom of my foot.
Wow. complete
your
shock.
instincts, you do things without thinking about it, and I did. I just immediately grabbed hold of my leg, and it snapped back down like a rubber band. I mean, it just,
Wow.
right back in place. But my kneecap was left on the side of my leg, and all the muscle on my thigh had been torn off of my bone. And it was all curled around on the side of my leg. And I was screaming in agony.
Yes.
I was outside, and I had large breed dogs, and they're jumping all over, freaking out. Mom's hurt, something's going on. And I'm screaming for my husband. And I'm in the middle of my yard, and it's raining, and my husband was getting ready for church, and I was out there. I really don't know. It was probably 2 or 3 minutes, and I was screaming, and I was praying, and my husband finally came out, and he goes, "What did you do?" And I lifted up my skirt, and he saw my kneecap, and he immediately, began freaking out. Oh my gosh, what do I do? And I said, "You call an ambulance." I was like, "I cannot get up."
Yes.
And he, immediately called 911, got an ambulance on the way, called people from our church to get, people to take care of, the church services, have somebody preach for him. So we were not going to be there. And he tried to help me get up. And every time I would let go of my thigh, I screamed in pain because I felt like my bone was going to snap in half. It hurt so bad. It was the worst pain. It was so much worse than giving childbirth without any medication. It was so intense. I almost passed out a few times. It was so bad.
I understand.
And I couldn't move. I couldn't let go. Couldn't do anything except just cry and pray. And my husband ran and put the dogs in the room, and he grabbed a blanket and he covered me up with it, so I would, not be rained on. And we waited for the ambulance service to get here, and it took them about 45 minutes to get here. They had the wrong directions, the wrong address. Oh, it was awful. So once they got me in, to the ambulance, he immediately started pumping medication, I kept telling him what I have. I had a spinal cord stimulator in, and I immediately turned that off because it was so very uncomfortable. It wasn't working properly, but they had never heard of RSD. They had never heard of CRPS. They weren't quite sure what it was and what to do with it, so they, just pumped me full of all this medication. It wasn't working, and the guy saw that it wasn't working. My heart rate was up. My blood pressure was, just ever increasing. He got me into the hospital, told the nurse, what I had, how much medication they had given me, and she kind of looked at him funny, when he said how much he had given, and they discussed it a little bit, and then she went off and got the doctor, and they literally gave me so much pain medication, everything that they had in the emergency room. They gave me the maximum amount of things that they could, but it wasn't helping. It was not touching any bit of my pain, and they called respiratory down because they were afraid that my heart would stop and that I would stop breathing because of all the medication that they gave me. They tried to pop my kneecap back in place. They did a CAT scan and X-ray, and they did some sort of CAT scan of the vessels to see if I had any blood vessels that were being cut off, the circulation. And once they found out that, all that was okay, the doctor tried to pop my kneecap back into place, and while I was still awake.
Yeah, I feel your pain. I'm
Screaming
sorry.
in agony.
Yes.
And I'm like, "Are you serious? Are you really going to keep trying this?" And he finally said, "We're going to touch you out." And I was like, "Thank you." And they knocked me out, and I'm out. I was asleep, knocked out, or however you want to say it, but I was not aware physically of what was going on. But, you know, my church people, they're like family.
Mm-hmm.
After church, they all showed up. They were all out there in the hallway, and they could see just about everything that was going on. And they later told me that they had 3 doctors that were there, and 2 of them had to pull the bottom part of my leg and twist it and turn it and manipulate to get the muscle and the kneecap back into place. And it took them a long time to do that. I just know that when I woke up, I was begging for them to please knock me out.
Yeah, I surely understand. I had a compound fracture, the right leg, and I was totally awake when the doctors, they were pulling and pushing the bones back into my skin and yanking the leg, and I was totally awake for it. I sympathize with you, totally.
Yes. It's torture. It really is. It's almost to the point where your civil rights are being abused. It is literal torture.
Yes, it is.
They could have knocked me out, and I don't know. It's just with that extreme pain, and the lady, the nurse, bless her heart, she's like, honey, it's all done. You're all done. And I was like, it still hurts. And she's like, I know. And she's like, and it's going to hurt. She's like, but you're all done, and we're getting ready to send you home. And I was like, okay. And, you know, my leg was immobilized for 6 weeks in a straight brace. And we all know that that's one of the worst things for RSD. Mm-hmm. But I didn't have a choice. The kneecap, the patella itself was broken. Mm-hmm. And I had to keep it immobilized in order for it to possibly function later on. Mm-hmm. So, you know, made an appointment to go to an orthopedic specialist that works just with the knee. And after I had healed up and went to my appointment, and, you know, they take x-rays every time to make sure that the bone is healing properly and that the kneecap is staying in place. Mm-hmm. And when you tell a doctor that does not know what RSD is, and they go to touch you still, you know, I'm not a person that freaks out and is like, oh, don't touch me, you know. I kind of hold my breath and I just brace myself. And this doctor literally, you know, would touch me, and my husband, you know, was there, and he's like, no, don't touch her anymore. He's like, you don't understand what kind of pain you're doing to her. You know, she's not going to scream and shout and tell you anything. She's going to wait till she gets home or till she's by herself, and she's going to cry so much, you know, but you don't see that, so don't touch her again. And the doctor just kind of looked at him, and he's like, oh, you know, I'm not real familiar with this. And, you know, my husband's like, well, I can understand. I see that. Mm-hmm. And once he okayed the kneecap, you know, was staying in place after the 6 weeks, he's, you know, like the other doctors, well, I've done all I can for you. There's nothing else I can do. You need to go to somebody who understands RSD and CRPS, and they can help you. So I, you know, went back to my treating doctor, and he got me in immediately to a new pain management doctor. My other doctor that had put in my spinal cord stimulator, I tried to get into him to get my stimulator, you know, checked out and everything, and he wouldn't see me because of being on workers' comp. I had to be on medication with this as severe as it was at the time, and he didn't do the medication part. Mm-hmm. So I was, you know, had to find a new doctor, and once I found this doctor, you know, he got me right on some medication. Started having the RSD spread from my ankle and area all the way up past my knee, into my leg, up into my hip and my pelvis area. And my leg was totally discolored. It had the molding. My skin was sloughing off. I, you know, could not touch it. Vibrations, everything was so much more worse than it had ever been. And I started having the is it the allodonia? I can never get that right. Where
swelling and
the involuntary muscle movement and the muscle cramp, where your feet and that limb is totally distorted. And I started having those severely. I'd be asleep, and my husband was trying to take a video of what my leg was doing while I was asleep. And it's really horrific to watch it while you're not aware of what your body's doing, and seeing it move like that and, twist and contort itself. It was pretty crazy. So the doctor got me on some medication that really stopped that. It didn't take it all the way 100%, but it stopped it from contorting so much and the violent jerking. Now I just have the muscles twitching, but he got me on some pain medicine that is a lifesaver. The opioid, the issues with that, about, the FDA trying to take those away. I couldn't live without mine right now. I would not be able to function. I wouldn't be able to walk. I wouldn't be able to go anywhere. I wouldn't be able to move. That pain was so intense. And once he got me on a good regimen of medication and got it balanced out, which took a couple of months to do, I was in a good place, and I felt good. My emotions were under control. The pain was bearable. It wasn't ever gone. It's never gone. It's just bearable. And he finally got me into a doctor to look at my spinal cord stimulator. And we took some x-rays. And my leads, the percutaneous leads, they're supposed to be up about between your shoulder blades a little bit, just a little bit lower than that. Well, mine, when I fell, apparently pulled loose, and they were all wrapped around my spine down at the base of my spine.
Wow.
You can literally see the wires that were all balled up in this circular mess down in my lumbar area, and my battery had actually flipped upside down and twisted, and it wasn't even in there laying flat. And so every time I would turn my stimulator on, I would feel like I was being electrocuted, and very, very uncomfortable feeling. And so they knew that had to come out, but we weren't quite sure how to go about getting it replaced and what I would need, because with RSD and CRPS, there's always that danger of it spreading. And anytime they do surgery, the patient, we always fear that it's going to make it worse instead of better. And those were, legitimate fears that I had and legitimate fears that my doctor had. But I also felt like I had no other choice if I wanted to ever get back to having a normal life, if I wanted to walk again, if I wanted to wear clothes, because I couldn't wear anything on my leg. My underwear hurt, my pants, there was no way I could wear pants, shorts, all hurt, my sheet covers hurt, the wind, the water, anybody with this knows what I'm talking about. It's like acid on you. And what is supposed to be a soft, gentle touch is not soft at all. It's very scratchy, like sandpaper. And so I didn't want my life to be that way. So I felt like having a new stimulator put in, or able to fix the one that was in, was probably my best bet of getting back to normal. And so after I thoroughly prayed about it, spoke with the doctors, and we had, I can't ever remember what it's called, but it's the type of scan where they inject a dye into your spinal canal, and they rotate you so that the dye...
The angiogram?
Yes, it's an angiogram. And so they looked at that, and they said that I had way too much scar tissue in my spinal canal, that they would not be able to fix the leads that were in there.
Or I meant
So we started
myelogram.
talking-
That's what it is, myelogram. I'm sorry.
Yes, that's it, the myelogram.
Myelogram.
Right. Yes. And so I had a couple of those done to check out everything, to see if, number one, if my spine itself was in good shape, and then if they would be able to fix all of the stuff that was in there. And, that wasn't able to be fixed, so my next step was to get the paddle lead. And the doctor that I went with, very smart, very intelligent, Dr. Lynn Lowy from Dallas, he warned me and said, you have an enormous amount of scar tissue in there, and I'm going to do my best to get these paddle leads put in there, but I'm going to have a whole neurological team watching you, and you're going to be hooked up to all these monitors, because if I make one move to pull that scar tissue off, and I could paralyze you. And he says, and we don't want that. And part of my mind was like, if that means no pain, I'm okay with that. I literally was, okay, if I could have the rest of my life with no pain and not be able to walk again, that's okay. I can do that. But then the other part's about, all the issues that come with that. So I'm just like, okay, I don't really want to be paralyzed, but I don't want this pain anymore. So, we went forward, and, he told me, and the St. Jude's rep from the spinal cord stimulator that I have in, she told me the same thing, that there were several times that he almost stopped because, if he moved anymore, he would have paralyzed me. If he would have done something, just a little extra. And so he said, I went in there a million times, trying different things, different ways to get it in, and I just couldn't get it in the right place. And he said, and I didn't want to paralyze you. And he said, numerous times, the alarms were going off, that your body wasn't able to deal with all of this. But we said, we tried it. Tara, the rep, she said, well, let's try this. So the paddle leads were not able to go in straight, up and down. They put them in sideways and kind of curled a little bit. And so that was the best that they could do for me with all the scar tissue I had in that area. He had to cut a little more bone out than what they normally do from a regular paddle lead when they do the laminectomy. And, but he did a great job. He did what he could. I just went back this last week to do a reprogramming because I'm still not getting a lot of the coverage in my thigh area where all that muscle was torn away from my bone. I still don't have coverage in that area on the outer side, my hip, and my pelvis area on the outer side still is very, very painful, and I cannot get any sort of stimulation there. So we went back to do a reprogramming, and because of the way they have that lead in there, I'm not able to get that stimulation. So I was notified last week that there's nothing else that this stimulator will do for me other than what it's doing now. I'm kind of was discouraged, but my faith in the Lord, I always know that there's a reason for everything, and I try to find all of those. And I was a little discouraged because to me that means I told you, Jennifer, I didn't want to cry on this, but
it's okay.
That means that, I have to go back in the wheelchair, and I have to stop doing physical therapy to walk again. I can't wear clothes very well still. I wear skirts. thank goodness that I live in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to surrender my fleshly wants because I want to walk again. I want to ride motorcycles again.
Mm-hmm.
I want to mow my yard. I want to wear nice dresses. I want to wear shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that they're telling me means that I can't do that at this time.
Mm-hmm.
There's things, that they can look into to do, but they don't look hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the things, my doctors,
Mm-hmm.
they aren't real optimistic of these other procedures helping my pain or anything.
Mm-hmm.
One is called a DRG, which is a dorsal root ganglion type of stimulator, and it goes down in the lumbar area right over the dorsal root nerve, where the nerve is coming out of the spinal cord and into the limb.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one option that I have of looking into. And they would put 4 different leads in to cover the entire lower back, hip, thigh, knee, and my foot.
Mm-hmm.
That's an option that we're going to be looking at.
And what about
Not
the
quite
pain
sure.
pump?
I'm sorry?
What about the pain pump? Will they still not do that? Your insurance?
They have not discussed that with me. I'm not sure why.
Mm-hmm.
The medication I'm on a lot. I take Dilaudid. Sometimes I have to take that 8 times a day.
Sorry.
I sometimes have to take it every 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I don't understand. I don't get a high from my medicine, and I'm not never experimented with drugs. I don't know, what people are talking about. Now, there's certain, like hydrocodone,
Mm-hmm.
makes me feel dizzy and sleepy.
Mm-hmm.
But the Dilaudid, I can take that, and I don't get any side effects other than lower pain.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't understand, when people talk about they take it for the high or whatever. I don't experience that
Mm-hmm.
with it, and I don't know if it's because my pain is so great that my brain works differently. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really care to know. I just know what I feel from it,
Mm-hmm.
and it helps me. And my doctor sees that it helps me, and I'm not neglecting myself. I'm not,
Mm-hmm.
acting, any differently. It actually helps me to be able to carry a conversation on.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're in so much pain, your brain literally cannot function. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot have a conversation. You
Mm-hmm.
can't think of words.
Mm-hmm.
You can't see very well because your brain is fixated on that pain.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it makes it feel like your pain is growing worse
Mm-hmm.
because you can't get relief.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't sleep, and you don't feel like eating,
It's a vicious cycle.
you really don't want to talk to anybody,
Mhm.
no matter how much you love that person.
That's right.
You just want to be alone. You
Mhm.
want to just curl up and be alone. And I do understand the suicide part of the disease because you really do just want to die. You want to just curl up and die because
Mhm.
this pain is so intense and you can't function, you can't think of anything else. And I read my scriptures and I would pray, and it just was so intense that whatever I read got twisted in my mind because the pain, it just does something to your brain. It literally changes the physiology of your brain chemistry.
Mhm.
And we aren't normal. We aren't
Right. Sometimes we
ourselves.
just have to sometimes you just have to turn off all the lights and all the noise and just lay there in one spot until it passes. I mean, and you just pray and ask God to take it and just give up, surrender, and just tell Him, you know, this is yours, and whatever, let your will be done. And then there's other times where we are in that high pain, but we have to force ourselves sometimes to try to talk to somebody, because when we start talking to somebody, it can divert our pain, and the next thing you know, we're feeling a little bit better. But that doesn't mean that we can get up. It doesn't mean we can get up and do things just like everybody else, because that doesn't work like this. This illness is not like anything else out there. And the pain takes you to new levels that you never thought existed here on Earth. But the coping methods are important to learn what works and what doesn't work for you, because sometimes what you do have, that list that you do have that works, may not work that next time. So you always are searching for something else to place for that. I'd like to ask. Go ahead.
I love that Facebook, that's how I got into a lot of the groups was through Facebook. I never really understood the RSD until last year when I broke my leg, and it was so much more intense than anything. I mean, I've had my finger cut off before, literally cut off,
I'm so sorry.
Back on. And this pain was so much worse than that.
Yes.
I mean, it like you said, it's nothing that we could have ever imagined would be here on this earth. It's just not. But, and you're right, that the coping skills, they may work that one time, but they might not work again. And those groups on Facebook, I think I joined every single one of them on there that I could, because so many people are dealing with different things, and we're all so different.
Yes.
And this disease, is different for each one of us. And so to see what works for other people and to help them and to give them your ideas and the herbal remedies that you take and the things that you use to help you, it's so good to have that, as it really is an emergency kit. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, when you cannot sleep but you're so exhausted, and your pain, that pain insomnia that we have, that just is not letting go, and you find that person, at 3 o'clock in the morning that's on Facebook that's going through the same thing you are, to have that conversation, even via text to them, it does help take your mind off of it. And sometimes you're like, I just don't want it to stop, because I know as soon as I stop, that's coming. It's very important to have somebody to reach out to. And not everybody's a believer like I am, but I always give my faith. I put my faith out there, and I really truly believe that, God has blessed me in many ways with this disease. I have great doctors. They're not fighting me on my medication. They're trying everything to help me. They give me, if I ask for anything, they're very willing to give it to me. I've been blessed with having great case managers and adjusters through workers' comp that, don't think I'm, making up something, or I'm, drug seeking, or I'm trying to work the system. I mean, they see all of this that I'm really going through, and I've been so blessed with that. I just cry every time I read somebody's post that
their
doctors think they're faking, or they can't get their medicine, or they have to move back home with their parents because their husband divorced them, or their wife left them, and they can't get around, and they're so incapacitated, and they don't have the money for things.
And they don't have the support. And that's so important. Yeah. They don't have the support. And, I mean, I know it's hard enough for our caregivers, our family, and so forth, which they are caregivers, well, some of them. But the thing about it, even some of our friends, and I'll tell you that I know that I see in my caregiver's eyes, and my best friend all the time, especially my best friend, I see it in his eyes, the pain, him watching me go through my illness. I can see it. And I know he's trying to understand, but he told me one time, He said, I never really understood the illness. I always tried to wrap my head around it. But the one thing that helped me to understand the illness was I compiled a inspirational storybook of 50 stories. And, of course, I had him edit it. And he said, that helped me so much to read those stories, because I realized that this is real, that people are really going through this, and you're all different, but yet you're the same. It's very, very complicated. I'd like to ask you, what have you done to reinvent yourself now? I mean, if you're headed in this direction that you think that you are in at, how have you reinvented yourself, and how are you going to reinvent yourself?
Well, I think that once I came to that point, we have to understand, we're all different individuals, and some of us can deal with more pain than others, and some of us can push through pain. I'm one of those people. I don't accept the word can't, and so, I always push through pain. I just, it's something that has been instilled in me as a child, growing up in Wyoming and not having brothers, but having to do hard work and labor that you have to do. And so you have to push through the pain and things as a young kid to get certain things done. And so I learned to do that. And that's always been my mentality. But with this, I've had a really hard time pushing through that pain. And sometimes that was my enemy, was myself, because I would try to do so much, and I would try to get out of bed, and it just hurt so much, and I would just, hold on and not really hide my feelings, but, just push them down so that I could get out of bed or do what I need to do. And I would break and I would cry, and my husband would come in and he'd be crying with me and he'd be praying with me. And I finally came to the point, and it's really, really been recent that I've come to this, is that God allows everything in our life to happen. In the Bible, Satan had to go to God and ask God's permission to do things to Job.
Yes.
And it's the same way with us.
Yes.
Satan, if he's going to do anything to us, he has to go before God and ask God if he can do this. Whether this is something that is Satan that is doing this to us, or what, God allows this to happen to us. And when I can grasp that thought that God allowed me to fall out there and break my knee, and allowed this disease to consume my body and my mind, that's because God allowed it.
Yes.
And we think of how insignificant and how small we are in the whole scheme of this world. I mean, there's billions of people in this world, and yet here I am, this one person, and yet God still allows something to happen to me. That meant he was thinking of me. And when we can think about that God was thinking of you that very moment that this accident happened, and that it allowed the disease to come into our body and to overcome our entire system, that's because of God. And God knew exactly what was happening to us. So I got that in my mind and in my head, and I pondered on it and I prayed on it, and then I thought, well, there's a reason, God, and I need to know what that reason is. We always ask why. Why do we have these? And we don't always come out with that direct answer as of why, or, what the reasoning is. But all these things happen in a period of time that we see, and if we allow all of it to come together and we think about what's going on with us and the people that are seeing us go through this, and we may not directly be something that changes them, but they can see how we are reacting to things. And I've had to ask God to help me surrender my flesh.
Yes.
My flesh wants to walk. My flesh wants to wear clothes like everybody else. My flesh wants to wear shoes. My flesh wants to have the energy to do something. I mean, I want to go to the grocery store. I want to go on a ride with my husband. I want to go visit people. That's my flesh. You know, not that there anything that I want to do is wrong. It's just my flesh that is has these desires. And God does things, and He allows things in our lives to get us to a certain spot or to guide us to go down a certain pathway.
Yes.
And when we can come to that point, and I came to it and said, okay, you know, I have to surrender my flesh. You know, I have to step away from my wants and my desires, and I have to allow God to guide me to the next step. And whether that means that that's in a wheelchair and on crutches and in skirts and not wearing a shoe on one foot, then that's what I have to be willing to do. And it's funny, we had a missionary in church today that gave a message. She's going to Japan. He gave a message in Acts where the Spirit, it was Acts chapter 16, verse 6 through 10. For those of you that will hear this that, you know, are interested in looking it up, the Spirit actually forbid them to go to certain areas to, you know, preach the gospel. And that's kind of how it is with us. Sometimes God forbids us to do certain things because He wants us to go a different route than what we see as the easiest route or the straightest route or the route that we want to take.
Absolutely.
It's not the route that God planned for us or wants us to be. And sometimes, and I'm stubborn. My sister-in-law that's on the phone can attest to that. I'm very stubborn. I'm strong-willed. And when you have your mind set to things, that is very hard to do, is to change plans in the middle of it. This is not my life. This isn't the life that I planned. This is not what I wanted to do. I don't think any of us said, oh, yeah, give me RSD. That sounds like fun, you know. But I had to come to that point and realize that maybe God is taking me through a different route to get to somewhere that I need to be, whether it's for my purpose or for somebody else's purpose. And I think that helps me a great deal, being able to deal with the ongoing pain and the ongoing changes that are constantly happening with this disease, is to realize that I have to surrender my will to God's will.
Right.
And my whole prayer and my whole mindset is more of you, Lord, less of me.
We have only 8 minutes left here, so I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
I want to ask you one more question, and I want to ask you, what advice would you give to somebody that's new to CRPS?
Oh, be careful of reading all of the material about this disease. Get enough information that you can understand it and be your own benefactor of, I can't think of the word, and benefactor is not the right word. You know, you have to be your own advocate. Thank you. Yes, we have to be our own advocate, you know, for our health and everything. But there's so much information out there that can scare you. It can cause you to go into a deep depression because you think that that's what your life is going to be like. Yes, there are so many terrible things that this disease can do, does not mean that that's what is going to happen in your life. Yes, there are people that have this affect their internal organs and their heart and all these other things, but that does not mean that it's going to happen to you. And I truly believe that our mind, our spirit, and our body are all connected. So when we give into the fear of what this disease can do, I do believe that it lowers our immune system more and it puts more stress on us, and therefore our physical body can be overtaken by more diseases and more ailments because of our fear. We're not to be fearful, and we need to be good advocates for ourselves and for our health, but don't get scared by all the information, and be very cautious of reading all of the information that's out there, because it can be very scary.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably one of the worst things that I ever could have done, was read all of the horrifying things that this disease can do, because I became very fearful and at times very depressed, that that's what was going to happen to me. And a new person, it can be overwhelming. It really can be.
Yes.
And find a circle of friends and a circle of people that will lift you up and that will understand those days that you have when you can't do anything. And people that will pray for you.
I want to thank you so much for being here and telling your story. And I pray that God will put His healing hands upon you. And I pray that other people will see the blessing in your story and it will touch other people's lives. I thank you so much again for being here. And I thank your sister-in-law for being here. Is there anything that you would like to say?
I love you, Carinda. Oh, I love you too, Jennifer. You are so strong. Yep, you are very inspiring.
Well, thank you again for coming, and I pray that you have a great evening.
Thank you, Marie.